So a week's worth of stuff locally, including Land Between the Lakes. We typically do some stuff around the Shawnee. We've got Sawyer training in years past with a whole bunch of our alums who are working with Davy Tree and some of the local and state agencies. So that's pretty cool. And those are going to be day trips. So that'll be meeting here in the morning at 0800, 9 o'clock, something like that, and getting started with our day, like pack a bag lunch, pack for rain and ticks and whatever else. And we'll be out doing a lot of the stuff that we talk about during most of your other classes and talking with people who are doing the things that we are doing professionally once you graduate. So those are pretty chill first days. If it's hot and muggy, the Sawyer work and training out at Touch of Nature, it can be a lot. So we want to make sure that in your day kit for the day, you have your personal protective equipment, including a big water bottle and a decent packed lunch, maybe some snacks. The issue is that, you know, if you are not well hydrated while you're doing physical work as a field forester, you are basically shrinking down your intervertebral discs on your spine, and so any kind of load lifting, bending, twisting, all of the stuff that we do, it has a much, much, much higher injury likelihood and severity. And these are the kinds of back injuries that, you know, they stick with you for a long time. Like, there's no really fully recovering. So we want to take that daily gear loadout and packing pretty seriously. Also, again, with rain gear and bug protection, in particular bug protection in Southern Illinois is going to be an issue. And you want to read the label and the fine print on things like permethrin, which is a chrysanthemum extract based contact nerve toxin for it's a acetylcholine antagonist, I think. So it basically causes like a massive neurological overload for insects that absorb it through their carapaces, and they die immediately. The problem is not your acetylcholine. We also use the same chemical in every one of our cells of our body as well. It's just that we have so much of it that the permethrin's not any kind of a threat to us in that way. It is, however, as a refined chemical, it is a sensitivity-inducing chemical. So if you start to develop any kind of a rash, any kind of a reaction to putting permethrin or other permanone or pyrethrin-based things on your clothes, this is not something that you put on your skin. But if it gets on your skin, it can sort of, each time it gets on your skin, make your response to that a little bit worse. So for example, there are a lot of field foresters and so forth in the southern Midwest like us who have been using permethrin for a long time, and now when they put their belts on too tight, it causes your whole midsection to break out in hives from what's called pressure urticaria. So it's not life-threatening or anything like that, but it sure does suck to be super itchy and on fire wherever your clothing is tight. Or like opening a jar of peanut butter, for example, your palms will swell up from pressure urticaria. So that is a side effect, that is a known side effect of pyrethrins, and we want to pay attention to that. You guys are young and beautiful, and I don't want you guys to have to live a life of asking somebody else to open your peanut butter jars. Okay. So yeah, read the label on that stuff. DEET is an industrial plasticizer. It does a number on DNA, but it works pretty good on mosquitoes. So think about the kinds of chemicals that you're comfortable using. Think about getting clothing, like very tightly woven outdoor clothing, for example. Performance fishing gear, if it's new, works pretty well with this. It's mosquito resistant. It's harder for them to get their proboscis through that tight weave and to bite you. So to the extent that you have long pants and long sleeves, and you'll have work gloves and stuff like that, you can save yourself a whole bunch of lifetime exposure dosing on any of these insect repellents, okay? Neither do I want you to not have any solution, just to throw up your hands and say, well, I'm not going to use any of this stuff. Tick-borne illnesses are brutal. And with climate change, the range and the contact frequency of the various tick-borne or tick-vectored illnesses is growing and intensifying. So we want to take that seriously too. Let's put multiple faculty members across the university and the hospital over the years, in particular Ehrlichia. So with that uplifting start, that's our first week. We'll be doing a bunch of stuff around here, and we'll finish typically by anywhere between 3 and 6 p.m. So the main takeaway for the first week is that you want to have some kind of logic for the ability to throw down a tent in somebody's backyard, or couch surf, or continue on your apartment's lease, or stay in your frat house, whatever. But for that first week, we need to have some place to stick you overnight. The other 3 weeks for rec camp, we'll be going long distance, and we'll go through the different stops here in a sec, but every once in a while, somebody gets caught out with not a place to stay. So if you want, you can camp in our backyard, but our puppy is very, very friendly and likes to bark, and I want you to be able to sleep well that first week. So you're welcome to do that. Our shower is okay, but generally recommend having some kind of a good place to stay. Yeah?
3 or 4 weeks is this camp trip. So we're doing a week here and then 2 weeks on the road, or
1 week here, 3 weeks on the road.
So a month.
Yep. Yeah, so intersession, the semester in which this class happens, is always starting the Monday following exams. So it's the Monday after the Saturday of graduation. This year, that'll be at registrar.siu.edu. You can always find all of the academic calendars right here. And let's see. No, not schedule of classes. We want calendars. Academic calendar. Here we go. Intern spring 2024. All right, summer intersession begins Monday, May 13th. Summer intersession ends Friday, June 7th. 4 fiscal weeks, as they say in Letterkenny. And for this class, since we're going long distance, typically I'm going to try and get you guys and gals and non-binary pals back to Illinois and to your homes or wherever you need to go next to deploy for jobs 1, 2, or 3 days early. So I'm going to shoot for about Wednesday of our final week, about June 5th. But on paper, we meet until the end of the business day on Friday, June 7th this year. Okay? Now, that is the Friday before summer classes start. So if you have a burly summer planned in terms of getting ahead or catching up on maybe a math class, for example, is a very common class to take over the summer, to just gut it out and finish it off in essentially 8 weeks. You can do that. You're going to be completely done and over with on summer camp before those classes start. So summer camp is a 6-credit class by itself. If you need that for any of your scholarships, that is an important detail, that amount of credit hours for a given semester. But that's not any kind of an overlap or problem. And again, I'm pretty good at getting us back a day or two early. And by the end of that 3 weeks, we're going to be about ready to be back and showered 3 times in a row until the water is no longer sort of dark gray coming off of us. It'll be a thing. Okay? Cool. Any other questions on timing or scheduling? All right.
First week, where do we go after that Land of Lakes?
Yeah. So we'll head to Land of Lakes, where they make butter. Land between the lakes is a national recreation area in kind of southwest central Kentucky, between the Kentucky and Tennessee rivers, now Kentucky and Tennessee Lake. And it is a Forest Service site. It's about 70, 80 miles long on this peninsula right here. This used to be just a ridge line between two rivers, but now it's basically cut off. We'll head as far south as kind of the Tennessee line, and we'll be moving all throughout here. The Forest Service uses Land Between the Lakes as an experiment site or a trial run for management site. They're not so much doing like forestry research on it. They're just kind of throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks in a national recreation area context where they can get in there and try a whole bunch of different stuff with a whole lot of visitors. This is one of the most heavily visited sites in the country overall. It's got 2 of the largest campgrounds in the entire federal system. It's got hundreds and hundreds of hunting compartments and dozens of competitive sport fishing events on these 2 lakes. Like, we can go pretty hard at Land Between the Lakes as recreationists and as foresters. So this is a great spot to kind of sandbox or test bed stuff out just to see what kind of ideas work pretty well, and then they can roll those out at other national forests to the extent that they apply. So there's a good couple of days, 2-3 days, maybe even 4, where we can try out everything. We've done gridded search and rescue, all kinds of stealth camping, backcountry stuff, and then all kinds of front country stuff, as well as forest resource management. So the forest hydro is a big deal here. The forest recreation management, huge deal here. It's a national recreation area. The wildlife habitat management here is chef's kiss, all right? Because they can go kind of ham on trying out different policies and procedures, and they got lots of square miles of space and full control of this landmass. It's pretty awesome for hunting and fishing and management thereof. There's also hundreds of miles of equestrian trails on site and OHV intensive use to the point that some of the ridges that used to be here are no longer there because they've been rooster-tailed out from under knobby tires for decades. Yeah, I guess that's one way to do mining, OHV use. Anyway, so we'll spend a couple of days there. And since we're going east this year, we'll launch from Land Between the Lakes. At the end of our, we'll start heading to Land Between the Lakes end of our first week, and then into the weekend, and then finishing up the weekend at Land Between the Lakes, we'll drive east to Shenandoah National Park. It's a pretty spot. And Shenandoah occupies the Blue Ridge section of the Appalachian Mountains overlooking Washington, D.C., about 70, 80 miles away. So, it's about the same-ish latitude, so we'll see some similarities in forest type, but there's some real elevation differences up on the ridge line versus down on the valley, so we can talk a whole lot about all sorts of important stuff like, you know, how is forest composition, structure, health, land use, how are those influenced by terrain, topography, and so forth, okay? So this is one of the older national parks, and it's got a scenic drive called Skyline Drive. It's awesome. It's pretty awesome. So this is gonna be our first big encounter with bears. Everywhere we go, we're gonna be on bear protocol, which for most of these places is really just low-key trash panda raccoon protocol. But at Shenandoah National Park, where the bears have actively been taught to accept and seek out, in particular, human food, they're highly mobile, they're highly motivated, and they're fairly intelligent and dexterous as well. This is the first place where our protocols on bears are going to actually have some teeth, so to speak. No pun intended. Was there a question? Comment? Yeah.
How many days have we spent in Shenandoah?
Shenandoah, we're looking to spend 3-4 days there. Yeah.
Will there be any opportunities for backpacking or other recreation
Yes.
when we go to these places?
Yeah. So the reason that we go to Shenandoah first is its location and all of these characteristics, the physiographic characteristics of it. but also from the human use side, the Appalachian Trail runs along the spine of this. About 70 miles of the Appalachian Trail's 2,200 miles are right through the ridgeline at Shenandoah. We'll be on the Appalachian Trail. You'll see the white blazes and stuff. And then there's a billion little blue blaze trails that go off to each side that connect down with the communities or hit some of these other side peaks and ridges, like Old Rag, stuff like that. That's a hell of a hike out to Old Rag and back. And so this is our first opportunity for those of you who later on in summer camp at White Mountains National Forest, if you want to get into some burlier backpacking opportunities, some world-class burly backpacking opportunities, this place is an awesome spot for your first shakedown cruise, like baby's first little hike, you know? You can do something that's fairly easy and winding along the ridgeline, like along the AT. It's about as highway as a trail can be, or you can really test yourself pretty hard on some of the loop hikes that drop down one side and then coming back up that side a little bit later to see any of the beautiful waterfalls and so forth, or bear habitat or salamander habitat, any of that stuff. Those are customizable in terms of length, difficulty, all of that stuff. So what we're going to do at each of these places where there's backpacking available, we'll basically self-select into challenge level groups. So typically we'll have a group of folks who are like, thanks but no thanks, Dr. Parr, you can miss me with all of that backpacking shenanigan. And we'll hang out at the base camp and do just like maximum day hike level stuff. All of our outdoor labs and that sort of thing. For folks who want to do just sort of a backpacking trip but not really kill themselves on it, there's typically like a couple or several moderate options. And then at all of these places, there's going to be one or more really gonzo, like, you know, full throttle kinds of hikes where you're going to really sweat it out. And so that's going to give anybody with like way too much testosterone or caffeine or whatever. I stopped making jokes about Adderall. It's a serious drug of abuse among college students. But anyway, if you're really looking to stretch your legs, there's that option as well. So here at Shenandoah, that's probably going to end up being a single night overnight because we have a bunch of other stuff to do there and I need everybody there for class stuff. But it is a chance to get out and shake down cruise your gear if it's new to you. And this is your first like real big trip with it. You can get to know your stuff, get to know your own physiology as well, and see how well you tolerate sweating it out. Okay? So there's a bunch of stuff going on in Shenandoah. We're not going to have any sort of lack of things to do there. It's a nice couple of days. Since we're so close to DC and the Park Service runs a ton of stuff in DC, like all the stuff at the National Mall pretty much, aside from the Smithsonian's, all those museums and so forth, we're going to spend about 4 days there as well, camping in a place called Greenbelt Park. And from there, we're going to have opportunities to essentially split up into smaller groups and fan out across the city according to your specific professional goals. So, for example, if you're pretty sure you want to start off your career working fire with the Forest Service, let's go roll out a half-day tour at the headquarters of the United States Forest Service. Talk with some of my old friends and colleagues working over there now. And if you're more of a Park Service, like human oriented forester person, then we'll spend a little bit more time in and around the National Mall, talking about search and rescue up into Washington Monument and what it takes to be that kind of a park ranger, with daily visitation typically around 50,000 people, right? In that size population, at least a couple of people, it's just going to be their day to have a heart attack. So what's it like to be a park ranger surrounded by some of the densest urban development and environment and a whole bunch of surface-to-air missile batteries in sort of the heavily curated natural space of the mall? So if anybody is into urban forestry, this is your place, right? This is where other countries from the last couple of centuries have been sending the United States ornamental trees as formal gifts of state, for example. So like the cherry orchard, with the cherry blossoms, we'll probably miss those, but that's a thing, right? So the forestry consequences here are pretty serious. And we'll see what they do in terms of urban forestry up close and personal at a world-class level. Washington, D.C. is also a swamp, so we're going to go to some national park sites, some Forest Service sites. If you want to, you can visit some tourist traps like the International Spy Museum. That's a fun one. If you're interested in historical, environmental, or cultural interpretation, if you've enjoyed that class or enjoy doing those things, we can go do some pretty world-class environmental, historic, and cultural interpretation venues like the Holocaust Museum. There is not a whole lot above spots like the Holocaust Museum or the Peace Museums at Nagasaki or Hiroshima, for example, in terms of interpretation, right? Like, what a story to tell. How do you tell a story like that and do it justice? One part of the story is injustice. So, we got something for everybody at DC. 3-4 days in DC is about all I can tolerate, so at that point we're going to head up the coast. We'll swing through Gettysburg National Military Park. That's a cool spot. We'll talk about managed fire and in particular white-tailed deer management at Gettysburg, both of which are proving to be a very tricky issue, and it is a lot. But for you military guys and gals, this is a pretty cool venue. And everything here hinges on forestry. So, bless you. Hey, bless you.
Thank you.
From Gettysburg is kind of just like a day site for us. We can't really extract too much out of it beyond that. So, we'll spend a day, maybe a day and a night there, and then drive up the coast to Acadia National Park, plus or minus a stop along the way. There's some really cool state forestry and park operations out along the East Coast. We've got several WAMCON folks here, so we can talk about things like falcons nesting in like New York City bridges and stuff like that, and see how tricky that is and what that means for things like pigeon ecology and so forth. But we'll get on our way on up to Acadia National Park. It's a long drive. Sometimes we do it overnight.
Are we still stopping at, you said like it's Washington, Mount Washington and stuff like that, the presidential range?
Oh, sure. Yeah, we're getting there. We're not there yet. That's White Mountains National Forest. So that's our last stop. And that's why it's our last stop, because there's world-class backpacking, a ton of really cool urban and small town forestry stuff, and like large-scale national forest stuff. But also the backpacking is, depending on the route that you select, among the deadliest in the world for anything that's not like strictly alpinism, mountaineering kind of stuff. Question?
We're at 12 days at this point, right? Spent 4 days at, Land O'Lakes, and then 4 days at
Shenandoah.
And then we go to Gettysburg for 2 to 3 days. So we're
Gettysburg, maybe 1. Yeah, we'll spend the bulk of our time remaining at Acadia National Park, just under a
10
week.
days at this point, 9 days.
Yeah,
So
so
we're
like
a week here?
5-6 days here at Acadia. It is on the Atlantic Ocean, so the weather here is going to be typically
Cold.
cooler than what we expect. We're going to peak probably about 70, 75 degrees maximum. Much more likely we're going to have a bunch of 50 and 60 degree days, partial overcast, probably not torrential rains. This is not the season or the region for that. But we're probably not going to stay dry the whole time. So we'll talk about what that means for your gear and loadout and packing and safety. And 50 degrees plus rain plus wind is enough to kill you with hypothermia. So we'll talk more about packing in gear and safety. Okay? Acadia National Park is a beautiful, beautiful place. It gets over 4 million visitors a year these days, and it's tiny. This island's something like 75,000 acres, and maybe 2/3 of that are actually in National Park. All of the rest is small towns like Southwest Harbor and so forth. So, we have a whole lot of people, 4 to 4.5 million people a year, jammed into this 2/3 of 75,000 acres, and several notable, very popular, understandably so, sites like the summit of Cadillac Mountain, the highest peak on the eastern seaboard, anywhere north of coastal Brazil. And it is the site where the sun's rays hit anywhere in North or South America a couple of weeks a year, immediately after we are there. So the sunrise is going to happen very early. And the sunrise is a very popular, pretty thing. So we'll have an option of getting up at 2:30 or 3 one morning and checking that out. There's also a bunch of good day hiking. There is no backcountry camping on this island, period. So we're going to be in sites, developed sites, and this is going to be pretty easy camping. Acadia, in order to cycle those 4.5 million visitors through every year over a window of about it's only a window of about 4 months, right? So we get 1/3 of the year to flush all of that traffic through successfully without destroying this place completely. The camping is extremely developed, right? So we'll be on tent pads and stuff like that, and pretty well taken care of in that way. We don't have to do a whole lot of thinking and problem solving like we do when we go out west to make sure that we have enough water. We'll have plenty of flush toilets, and the local gateway community, a place called Bar Harbor, is lots of fun. If you want to gross out your family and friends on Insta, you can get butter ice cream with cooked lobster chunks in it. That's a thing here. And everything in between, right? So we're going to deal with the forest recreation management of pulses of thousands of visitors coming off of cruise ships that anchor in the Deepwater Harbor here. They can drop 3,000 to 5,000 people at once over the course of about half an hour into the island, and they sort of swarm everything, and then they're gone that night, so the cruise ship can go further up or down the coast along its itinerary. So that's not something we typically think about managing as foresters, but it's something that we're managing as foresters because these cruise companies got to make their money, and so they're bringing their passengers to our national parks, our national forests, and we get to deal with that. So we'll talk about human uses. We'll talk about wildlife like the peregrine falcons, the fastest creature on Earth, topping out at around 250 miles an hour during its hunting dives into the ocean to fish. There are some pretty awesome ocean-facing cliff faces. So this seems like it would be a pretty cool spot for peregrine falcons to nest, and also a really cool spot for rock climbing, which is a thing. You can climb at spots like Otter Cliffs down the coast here if you want to bring some gear. And we'll talk about Via Ferrata style hikes, and we'll go on one of those at not the precipice trail right here. So the precipice trail goes up this cliff face, kind of just up it. You're sort of spidering your way up. It's a bunch of iron bars, Via Ferrata, hammered into and anchored into the rock with epoxy. And it's not quite rock climbing. You don't have to be on harness, but it feels pretty close to it when you're scaling cliff faces and looking out over the ocean. So the next ridge line down at the Beehive, this area over here, has another one of those Via Ferrata style hikes, and it is every bit as good as the precipice hike and all of that. So the nighttime hiking at Acadia National Park is among the very best that I've ever experienced anywhere in the world. So you guys will have the option, of course, of doing something like a Beehive hike or hiking up any of the faces. There are 4 different trails that approach the summit of Cadillac Mountain from each of the 4 cardinal directions. And looking out over the ocean at night, ideally with a full moon. I haven't checked the moon phases yet, but that's a pretty magical experience. And you'll learn a little bit about yourself and the world around you doing it. So, we'll talk mostly about recreation management stuff here, but as you can see with the peregrine falcons, this is granite geology. So the soils assumptions that we have about Midwestern forestry, they're completely different. They don't work over at a place like Acadia. Granitic soils are completely different. On top of these ridge lines, the soil is typically a few millimeters thick. So that's different than what we're used to, and it has consequences for things like crumb holes or transition zone trees. This area is just pretty much subalpine. Some of the Cadillac's pretty bare, but that's mostly because it's been trampled to death, not because it's that high elevation. So we'll spend the better part of a week at Acadia National Park, and we will leave before, as Baz Luhrmann says in his graduation song, leave before it makes us soft, because Acadia is nice and super soft. It's 10-ply, as they say in Letterkenny. So from there, it's time to finish off our trip at White Mountains National Forest, the Pemigewassa Wilderness Area, and so forth. So let's take a look at that one on Google Earth and see what it looks like. White Mountains National Forest. So this does get above tree line, and above tree line big enough you can kind of see it from space. Not on the screen, but eventually. Let's scroll over to that part. All right, so what Mike was asking about earlier is this section here. This is a whole mountain range inside of White Mountains National Forest. Remember, Shawnee is one of the smallest national forests in the system. Other national forests, even east of the Mississippi like this is in New Hampshire, they can be a lot bigger than what we're used to. And so our general sense of the kind of the scope of things can vary pretty widely versus what we're used to. So that's a pretty important reason for getting to some of these other places to expand our horizons a little bit. This is the presidential range of the White Mountains, and it is like a 22 mile traverse depending on which particular route you take up. You can see the trails. Mount Washington, there's a visitor center, weather research site, and essentially search and rescue post permanently situated atop Mount Washington. Mount Washington, by virtue of being its peak, by virtue of being at its specific latitude and elevation, this is one of the spots where the jet stream, that 500 to 700 mile per hour continuous wind belt around the North Pole, this is one of the spots where it's closest to the surface of the Earth. So when weather conditions are right or really wrong, depending on your perspective and desire for survival, this is when, you know, the wind god reaches down and kisses everybody to death. So the highest recorded surface wind speeds on the planet of all of human history were recorded here, over 250 miles an hour, right? So a hurricane is like less than half that, right? This is not like hit you with a street sign tumbling down the way. This is like a yeet you off the mountain kind of a wind. So some of the hikes here are pretty dangerous. This bowl right here, this is Tuckerman's Ravine. It is steep and shaded. It is essentially, I believe it's an east-facing slope, and it retains that snow year-round. So in June, we'll see people hiking up the Tuckerman's Ravine Trail with snowboards attached to their backs to just say that they've sent this little section right here. It's not a long drop or anything, but it's cool to say they did it in June. Tuckerman's Ravine Trail is also, it's like top 3 deadliest in the Western Hemisphere. So we want to take our practice runs at Shenandoah very seriously. We're not messing around here. So these hikes are all optional for you, right? None of your grade is dependent on you choosing which hikes or which backpacking trips you want to do. Again, there's a really nice Forest Service campsite right over here, where we go hunting for moose sheds and mountain lions that are also after the moose, but not their sheds, while the other folks are up here running from, honest. How many of you guys, show of hands, have you heard of thunder snow before? This is a place where thunder snow is a thing, right? So where atmospheric turbulence is high enough and it's high enough elevation that it's not coming down as rain, it's coming down as snow, but that static electricity charge differential still builds up, and so forth. So, of the 4 times that I have brought students to the Presidential Range to attempt the traverse, a 22-mile hike, which you could do in a day if you're dumb. 22 miles isn't that far, but this is, pardon my French, kind of a fucking insane walk. Okay? It's real pretty, but it's tough and deadly. Of the 4 times, I've had success. Well, I got across it personally, but on summer camp, we've had 0 classes actually make it. So you might be the first. You might be the first. Thunder Snow has scrubbed 2 of those. Just cold weather, and one of the guys was a smoker and was having continuous asthma attacks. Scrubbed a 3rd. And the 4th one, there was somebody who was on the keto diet, and like it totally screwed with their brain, and it started flipping out and had to come down. So, right, you do you, boo. There's also, around this area, a much more chill vibe at the Pemigewasset Wilderness area, which is just a little bit west of this. And it's basically a 360 bowl of ridges. So the Appalachian Trail also goes along the Presidential Range, and it goes along the rim of the Pemigewasset Wilderness as well. And the backpacking inside the Pemigewasset is awesome. It's fording rocky streams, like whitewatery streams. The 360 ridge line is like 350 degrees. There's a little gap that everybody goes into and out of. There's no cell phone service, none of that stuff. When you go in there, there's no lights visible anywhere at night, unless you go up to the ridge line and look out. It's about as primeval as it gets east of the Mississippi, anywhere in the country. So that's a really, really nice several days. So we'll have 4 or 5 days at White Mountains, maybe as few as 3 if folks want to come back early, hit that Wednesday or Thursday return time. And by that point, we're going to be plumb tuckered, as Huck Finn might say. It'll be time to roll on back. It's like a 18 or 20 hour drive. We'll see if we can't stop by my parents' house. They'll cook us like a breakfast casserole. It's nice. We'll camp out in the yard, get a shower if you want, and be back in Southern Illinois, safe and sound. So those are the big strokes of our itinerary. There's lots and lots and lots, a million little targets of opportunity along the way, so to speak. We're going to be in a very target-rich environment. So we're going to hew to that overall schedule, right? We have some reservations that we have to take advantage of. And to the extent that things like weather happen, we're going to adjust those itinerary plans on the fly, A, to keep everybody safe, and B, in recognizance of the idea that this is a work trip, right? We're here to learn a bunch of stuff, gain comfortability, skill, self-efficacy, and so forth. And as happens occasionally, we've already gotten one this year, if a polar vortex drops down and clobbers, northern New England here in end of May and June, right? We could be shut out of going to hike the Presidential Range because they close it down when it gets genuinely lethal. And that can easily happen in June with the jet stream being where it is. Okay? So, polar vortices are also something we're worried about when we go out west. We got nailed by one when we went to the Grand Canyon. It was like May 29th and 6 inches of snow on the ground up there. That was not popular. It was pretty, but it sucked after a week. Anyway, that's our itinerary. What questions do you have about the itinerary before we jump into starting to answer questions about gear and food, pretty much?
The first week, Monday through Friday, and then do we leave on Saturday, or we have the weekend off and pull out on Monday?
Yeah, we'll, currently the plan is to head out for Land Between the Lakes on Friday start a day. But if a bunch of folks are like, Park, I just can't do that. I can't be gone for all 3 weekends in the middle of our class. You gotta flex somewhere. That's where I have the ability to flex. The other 2, we're definitely out, right? So if you need to be home that weekend for any reason, let me know, and we might be able to work something out. Or if a bunch of people are like, I can't do this, then, you know, I'll adjust our Land Between the Lakes plans a little bit. Good question. Yeah.
So yeah, kind of going off of that, I think the week after school, there's like a bunch of RTC training for CST, which is like big summer test thing for the cadets and stuff like that.
Okay.
Would I be able to come to like some of them when the summer or the extra training that they do, and then like meet you guys there, like afterwards? Like it would be like a land nav test, and then I'd have to drive over to wherever you guys are at and
Okay.
take the class. Would that be like at all a possibility?
So that'd be like a half-day test kind of thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's possible. Yeah, that first week we're just going to be around Southern Illinois, right? Never more than about an hour away, so that's fine. Other questions? All right, cool. Let's talk a little bit about gear. There's a lot to think about with this. So, if you have a smart device, you can point it at https://Logan hyphen or dash, that's an N dash for those of you typographers, park.org. Hit the go button, and then if you mouse over teaching, the first link is Forest Rec Summer Camp. I got a bunch of info for you there. This may crash your phone. It's a lot of info, and a whole bunch of embedded YouTube videos, which apparently Google is trying to, I don't know, spyware you through cookies or something, and just, it crashes a lot of mobile browsers. So anyway, we have our destinations list and itinerary, so a longer broken out list of a whole bunch of different topics at each of these places. It's by no means exhaustive, but it's a pretty good head start on, like, what are we going to be talking about when we're at Shenandoah versus DC versus Acadia versus White Mountains National Forest, and so forth. We got some frequently asked questions about stuff like bringing your dog or driving separately, etc. And then the gear and packing list is a big one. A couple of years ago, we had a pretty intrepid TA, Leah, who helped record a bunch of how to pack your pack, how to stretch out and warm up your body before you start swinging a 50-pound pack onto your spine so that you don't blow it out, and stuff like that. So take a look through these videos when you get a chance. They're not particularly awful. And this is trustworthy information. You're never really sure the quality of stuff that you're seeing on YouTube, but like, we made these. So hopefully this spring I'll have some more time to post more of these videos. There's a bunch more of them kind of waiting to go. But I've got a copy of our gear list here on the page, and then as a downloadable file as well if you would like. So if you read through this list, you'll see that typically I've got multiple parallel suggestions or requirements for each class of gear. So for your tent, you can bring a sturdy 4-season double wall freestanding tent. You can bring a hammock instead. You can bring a tarp. You can bring any kind of shelter like a bivy sack, if you're familiar with what those are. But you don't have to bring all of the things on the list. You just gotta solve the shelter from rain, wind, snow, and bugs one way. Just out of curiosity, is anybody planning on doubling up with a friend that's also taking the class tent-wise? That's an option for you, as long as you're really pretty sure you can tolerate 3 weeks in the tent with somebody. It's like being married, which, for some of us, not a bad deal, but for others, not the greatest life way, as the youth say. So, if you or a friend has a bigger, like a 3-person tent, a 3-person tent works great for 2 people. A 1-person tent doesn't really even work well for 1 person. So whatever the size rating on the tent is, round it down. Okay, divide by 2 and round it down. And that seems to work pretty okay in terms of actual realistic tolerance. You're gonna need some kind of a pack. If you are 100% sure that you're not gonna go backpacking, you're just gonna do base camping the whole way through, that's completely fine, and you don't need an internal frame backpack. You can bring a huge duffel bag, that's fine. We probably don't have room for more than 1 expedition backpack or a similar duffel bag for each person's gear, because we gotta stick all of us and our food into our vehicle or vehicles as well. So if we can limit it to a backpack or duffel, a medium to full size day pack or backpack for quick access stuff in the cabin of the vehicle with you, and then a big tote with hopefully a clasping or locking lid for all of your food, so that your food doesn't get destroyed packing and unpacking the vehicles repeatedly. Then that covers about all the space we'll have, regardless of which vehicle type that we take. Okay? So think about kind of those 3 containers for fitting everything else into. If it's not in there, tradition or history has shown that it's going to get, stepped on, left behind, ripped up, snapped, whatever, right? I mean, we go pretty hard these 3 weeks, and nobody's trying to destroy your gear, but, things are going to happen. So put anything delicate into a hard case. If you want to bring a fancy DSLR camera or something like that, bring it in a hard case, and pack other electronics in there as well. You want to plan on everything getting wet from the inside and the outside. So for example, if you fall into that temptation to try to bring a big bottle of whiskey or something packed into your pack, surrounded by clothes, it's going to get shattered sooner or later. It's happened before. And sometimes the getting wet from the inside is a classmate who has celebrated someone's birthday on the trip, someone's 21st birthday on the trip, and they're still learning how to hold their liquor, and so sometimes the wet from the inside is from inside the person. Okay? So all that to say, you want exterior rain protection, like a rain shell for your backpack if you're going to go backpacking, but you also want to invest in a couple of contractor bags, yard waste bags that are thicker plastic, and you can stuff inside each of the major compartments of your food, day pack, and expedition pack. You just kind of twist it shut, push all the air out, and zip the thing or pop the lid on, and everything stays totally waterproof. As an added bonus, if you stop your fall with your face while you're fording the stream in the Pemigewasset, for example, the trail goes back and forth across it multiple times, you would not have your pack buckled onto you. You would throw your pack off so it doesn't drag you down the current and beat you to death against the rocks. Your pack will float a lot longer with those internal, essentially air bladder cells of the rain protection that you paid 5 cents for each bag for the contractor bags. Okay? So our packing list has a whole bunch of little tips and tricks and stuff, as they say, like that. So take a look on through. And for safety and survival items, you need to have it. For pretty much everything else, optional. Okay? Things like hiking poles, optional. Things like some means of sterilizing water, whether that's a chemical oxidant like Aquamira or droplets of bleach. Would not recommend bleach. There are pathogens that can defeat bleach just fine in the Northeast where we're going. You could use a water filter. You could use a gravity filter. You could bring a full cook set and fuel and boil the water. That takes a while, and deoxygenated water tastes a little flat, but it is generally safe to drink. We won't generally be at such high elevation that you'd have to boil it for like an hour. That's more on the western trips. Okay? So you would just need like one out of those different methods for removing bacteria and viruses from the drinking supply, okay? Cool. So that's the gear list. What questions you guys have about gear? Beg, borrow, or steal it. You don't have to buy anything to impress me, okay? You can rent stuff. We can borrow stuff from my Gear Cache or the Backpacking Club, right? Backpacking Club?
Yeah.
All right. You can get stuff locally at Shawnee Trails. Rick will price match and generally try to give you a student discount if you're getting a bunch of stuff there with him, like 10%, something like that.
There is a 50% off on all outerwear with Patagonia there, and Patagonia has a free repair policy, so I definitely recommend this, like solid Gore-Tex stuff. You guys want that?
Yeah, Patagonia only fits you if you're actually wearing that size or smaller.
Yeah.
Just go ahead with that
You
information.
could score some good Patagucci. Also, remember, you can score new with the tag on outdoor clothes, typically at places like Goodwill, Salvation Army, or the Renew store in town. There are at least 4 clothing featuring thrift shops that I'm aware of just in Carbondale. And if you go, make a habit of going once every 2 weeks between now and then, you can probably get almost everything that you need. The key thing that you have to, I can't budge on this for your safety, you cannot get this wrong, is you cannot be planning on bringing one thread of cotton on your body when you're out backpacking or in the field. I can't keep you alive in those conditions where we're going. So, cotton is a hygroscopic, meaning absorbs moisture from the atmosphere ambiently, and it is hydrophilic, meaning water wants to wet along the fibers instead of beating up and rolling off like it does with nylon or other plastic fibers. So, at least 2 full outfits, like underwear all the way out, socks into as well, unless they're wool, but wool is not cotton, right? It's got to be no cotton blend, no nothing that is cotton. All right, you can have a cotton bandana, that's it. And I'm kind of sounding like a hard ass on that, and clothes are expensive. Go to Goodwill. You don't have to, nobody's gonna know either way, right? So just get the clothes that you need. If affording one or a couple of sets of clothes is any kind of an issue, come to me in confidence. I've got a whole bunch of stuff from previous years. And if you're anything close to my size, I probably have something for you. Maybe not for you, but for most of us, I can get you at least partway there. So, don't be shy. I'm happy to help. That's what it's there for. And take a look through the rest of the list. That's kind of it that's the big sermon on gear. The only other thing is that I call attention to on the gear list is the 20-degree rating for survival or comfort on your sleeping bag. It has to be rated for 20 degrees because we can hit 20 degrees with wind chill if you're going up on any of these mountain ridges, okay? And I know that's crazy, it's gonna seem completely ridiculous and you're gonna kind of roll your eyes at me at night at Land Between the Lakes when it's like 85 at night. But,
Northeast is unforgiving, yo.
yeah, it's built different, as they say. As Yeezy once rapped, damn they don't make them like this anymore. The Northeast, right? We're going where nor'easters are fatal storms. If any of you guys ever read the old book or saw the old movie, The Perfect Storm, we're going right there. So yeah, it's got to be rated to 20 or better. So if you have more money than sense, you can get a convertible bag, which is like a 35-degree bag that you can zip on an additional layer of insulation called a lid and drop it down to 20, 15, or 0. Those tend to be kind of expensive. and you want to think about, do I want a down bag, which will last a very long time, is typically lighter, more durable, and every bit as effective as a synthetic fill bag if I can keep it dry. I have to be able to keep down dry.
Don't forget, you also have the backpack with that sleeping bag too.
Say again?
So don't forget, you have the backpack with that sleeping bag too.
Yep. So, 20-degree bags are typically a pound or more, but that's okay. If you make the mistake of going to Walmart, do not get an Ozark Trails tent. They make pretty okay cookware. The camp seats are super cheap and will break right away. And the tents will fail the first night. There was a stretch from 2010 to 2012 where 3 years in a row I had somebody's Ozark Trails tent fail on the first night of summer camp. And it became kind of a meme. And if you think back to 2012, that was kind of like when memes were ascendant, you know? So, don't be that person, right? Those Ozark Trails tents are like $40 for a reason. If you want to split the cost of a tent or borrow a tent or anything like that, you have lots and lots of options. Just don't put yourself and put the rest of us in danger of having to deal with a busted tent. That's a showstopper problem. We have to stop everything we're doing and deal with that to make sure everybody's safe before we can get back to the action. Yeah.
Cheapest tent, right, would be the Coleman, that's actually decent.
Yeah, Coleman makes
Yeah.
decent entry-level stuff.
Right.
It's not the lightest, it's not the prettiest, but yeah, it'll do the job. I used a Coleman tent for a decade, it worked fine.
I was just saying because I got mine for $30 at, Mike, what was that place right by you, Ollie's? Yeah, I got mine at Ollie's, it was $30, it was a $60 tent, yeah, for $30, it's a two-person.
Nice.
So that's perfect for me, you know?
Okay.
I'm assuming two-person, as you just said, was good for one person, because we have to
Yes.
throw gear in there.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolute minimum would recommend a 1.5 person tent.
So we don't have to bring cook gear, you got that shit already, right?
Say again?
We don't gotta bring cooking gear, you got that shit already?
I have a ton. The stuff that I have isn't super lightweight, so if you're trying to be Captain Titanium, lighter than a fart, then you probably want to get your own stuff. Maybe like an alcohol stove, which is slow but very lightweight and very quiet. I have about a dozen MSR Whisperlight 2s, the international model, which can run on gas, diesel, paraffin, whatever. And they do the job. They're kind of heavy, but they can cook a ton of stuff. They can melt a lot of snow. They can boil a lot of water, make it safe, and so forth. The move in between an alcohol stove, sort of the submarine of the cooking stove world, and the battleship of the Whisperlight 2s is what's called a torch or a blowtorch style stove, like the Dragonfly or Pocket Rocket, both of those made by MSR, Mountain Safety Research. It screws onto a bottle of butane or isobutane, and you just spark it, and it's basically a blowtorch flame, ideally with a spreader so you don't get a real hot red spot on the bottom of your pan and burn all the food right there. Some folks will bring a jet boil. That's a specialized, vertically integrated cooking solution with pot, insulator, grippers, fuel, and stove, and sparker. But a jet boil is really good at one thing: boiling water fast, not for cooking. Okay? So if you get a jet boil, you need to pair your food choices with that, where it's just add a bunch of boiled water to this and let it reconstitute. Like freeze-dried stuff works great with a jet boil. If you try to cook ramen in a jet boil, A, don't be eating ramen. That's a terrible idea on this trip. And B, the jet boil will instantly boil over and melt the insulating sleeve and burn you and all that stuff. And remember, we're all wearing plastic clothes, essentially, when we're out there. And if that boiling water tips over onto you, it will melt the clothes onto your skin, typically your lap, where your genitals are. This happened on a rec program trip several years ago, and the person had to get reconstructive plastic surgery on her genitals, and that's a hell of a way to start a trip. So, all that to say, jet boils are awesome at one thing: boiling water, and not at cooking. So,
What you're saying is we don't have to bring our stove or anything, you got that, right?
you don't have to, no. You can use one of mine, or you can bring your own. That's fine too. I'll have all of our forestry field equipment that we'll use on various labs throughout the trip. You want to have a field notebook and a pencil, standard stuff. Write in the rain, very good idea. Everything gets wet on this trip. Bring some spending money, however you like to go. If you're a man, I really like to kind of blow off steam by going to a restaurant every other night or every night when I'm traveling. You want to bring a lot of money. If you're more of a kind of hang back at camp and just kind of make my own stuff, I've been soaking these beans all night, I'm ready. Kind of a person, maybe a little bit of extra cash for buying some postcards home to mom and dad or your significant other, or your pet. And that's kind of all you need for that. I cover all of the entrance requirements, gas costs for the university vehicles, and stuff like that. So you won't have to shell out to do anything that's required for class. What else? Other questions? I'm here as long as you guys need. It's 1 o'clock, so if you got to roll to another class, that's cool. Otherwise, let's keep on talking it out. Yeah.
So, no cotton, obviously, or blends, but does that cover other cellulose-based fibers like rayon and stuff?
Anything that's hydrophilic. So.
You could wear hemp clothes if you wanted to.
Yeah. So other natural fibers are or can be okay. So wool, for example, the natural lanolin in wool is A, flame retardant, and B, hydrophobic and naturally antimicrobial. So wool stuff is really good. If anybody has a rich aunt or uncle, or if you're a trustafarian or something, get base layers of merino wool, and you're gonna be the happiest camper on the trip. Or that fancy silver colloid impregnated fibers, so you don't get any of that Fremunda cheese going on. Yeah, those things are amazing. You can wear them for a week straight, no big deal. Anyway, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
I'm not sure if rayon is hydrophobic or not.
No, I wasn't sure.
Yeah. Capilene is a synthetic fiber, nylon stuff. Nylon stuff will really smell. Polyester is warm when wet. It's also warm when dry. And polyester is an ideal growth substrate for pit bacteria, so that in particular will stink pretty fast. But you can get antimicrobial treated polyester clothes even at Walmart under the Dickies brand for their outdoor the road worker kind of things, the neon green plastic shirts, whatever. Those are antimicrobial for the first couple of washes, and then they're nasty as anything else, but those actually work pretty well. And they're $3-4 if you catch them on sale. So, other questions about clothing, about gear? Is anybody planning on wearing shoes on this trip?
I just plan on going barefoot, bro.
Yeah.
All right.
Native American style.
Feel the trees.
We joke, but the burliest Appalachian Trail hikers I've ever seen in my life were two women who walked the whole thing barefoot, and the soles of their feet were shoe leather and black, not melanated, black. It was nuts. I mean, walking over broken glass, no big deal. Anyway, just burly as hell. So yeah, if you're a barefoot person, don't ever let anybody talk down to you. I'll be in trail runners. You don't want to be in cross trainers. Trail runners are a specific kind of low top, quick drying shoe. They're not waterproof, but they dry out basically instantly. There's a plastic last, an insole that stops the foot from flexing when you step on a sharp rock or a root or something. The weight of you plus your pack plus the exertion of moving up or down a slope, for example, that can be up to 4 or 5 times when you're in motion, 4 or 5 times your resting weight. So it's very, very important that you don't just use tennis shoes or Chucks on this class. Your arches will collapse and you'll hate yourself and me for it. So at least wear trail runners. You can wear, low, mid, or high, like full ankle boots. Boots will stay drier longer until they get wet, and then they'll stay wetter longer until they're dry. So just kind of pick your poison on ventilated shoes or water resistant or waterproof shoes. Okay? Cool. We have space typically in our bags for about 3 outfits of clothes, plus 1 set of top and bottom rain gear, plus a wide-brimmed sun and rain hat, plus a top and bottom thermal layer like fleece leggings or fleece pants and a fleece top, or fleece overalls if you like the old lumberjack vibe, with or without the trapdoor in back, right? And that's a lot of bulk inside your pack. So you can get away with up to about 3 outfits. We'll have a couple of chances to hit up washing machines and showers along the way. A place like Acadia National Park would devolve into chaos and looting if folks weren't able to get showers, pretty much whenever they wanted. So that's a thing. And you definitely want to have more underwear, and you definitely want to have more socks. Lots and lots of extra socks. So it's not at all unforeseen for us to, be out doing a field day and it's like raining on and off, and changing your socks 3 times that day to fresh, dry pairs of socks throughout, so that you're not getting blisters that are going to be an issue for you for the next 6 weeks. If those blisters pop and are no longer an aseptic environment, that infection can spread to your bloodstream very easily, and that's an existential problem from a blister, right? I mean, can you imagine the eulogy at your funeral? It's like, yeah, he made it through forestry and various presidents, old and young and so forth, and it was the blisters that got him.
That's how Calvin Coolidge's son died.
No kidding.
While playing tennis, he got a blister and it got infected and he died.
Damn, that's worse than diarrhea.
I know.
And that hit Calvin Coolidge really hard.
Yeah.
He had some really, really metal quotes after his son died
He
about
totally
it.
zoned out after that.
Yeah, that basically dismantled him from the inside out.
On his inauguration or birthday, I don't know, it was some celebration. He was like, "Man, shouldn't have let him play tennis."
I did not know that. All right.
That's why he listened, now we all learned.
It'll kill you fast, yeah.
So yeah, we'll have some expedition first aid kits. They're big and they're chock full of stuff. To the extent that you want to bring your own first aid and other personal protective equipment like that.
Please don't break a leg, because I won't treat you for real. If you have a bone sticking out, no, but I'll treat everything else.
Whatever you decide to bring, you have to know how to use it. Okay, not like just, I read the instructions on the back in the aisle at the store and I was super excited about buying gear, so I got this tourniquet. But like actually know how to use it, like practice and so forth, because you perform like you practice, not how you read. So, if you're using Israeli bandages or tourniquets or SAM splints or anything like that, you need to know how to use it. If anybody has individualized like medication needs, like got to keep insulin cool in a fridge, or Park, here's an extra copy of my EpiPen, just hang on to that in case I start going blue in the face or what have you. That's all cool, let me know. We'll take care of whatever logistics we have to with that, right? So this class doesn't go without you. So we'll take good care of each other. We'll be looking out for each other as we go. If anybody has any food allergies, please let me know that well in advance here so we can all start buying our food when stuff's on sale and in bulk, importantly. And if we need to avoid like all tree nuts or something for everybody, then we will. But you gotta let me know right away, okay? But you can let me know one-on-one. Doesn't have to be a big thing in front of everybody if you're worried about that. We'll practice a whole bunch of skills. So if you've never spent a night in a tent before, you're gonna have plenty of experience by the time we're done, and we'll spend some time like on our first day or two just trying the stuff on for size, really the first time for at least a few of us, and that's okay. All right, so don't feel like you're starting at a deficit like you come to school to learn, right? So I'm not making any assumptions about anybody being Captain Outdoors person, okay? What other questions do you guys have about gear? About stuff to bring, stuff that seems like a good idea but probably shouldn't bring it? That's on that list as well. You guys want to talk about food a little bit? All right, cool. The main thing is you're going to perform like how you eat. That's the whole thing. Yeah. If you eat shit, you're going to feel like shit. Okay? So, things that are processed, meaning things that you can't look at it as a whole food product and identify the ingredients by sight. Like if it's made with cranberries, you should be able to see chunks of cranberry in there, okay? If it is ultra processed, like a lot of shelf-stable things that seem like they'd be a great idea for backpacking are ultra processed. They've been stripped of a lot of their nutrients and a lot of the fiber. So, it has happened on this class that somebody was eating a whole bunch of ramen, not drinking a whole lot of water, and came to me with rumbly guts saying, "Park, I don't feel good." And so we went down the differential diagnostics tree, a dichotomous key, if you will. And it emerged that this young man hadn't pooped in 4.5 days at that point. And that is right on the near side of, it's not constipation, it's called an impacted bowel. So your large intestine, your lower colon, works exclusively to dehydrate your feces so you're not blasting out Hershey squirts every time you go to the bathroom. And in so doing, gets severely dehydrated. So if like a plug of feces takes a little bit too long to get through that section because there's not enough bulk fiber in the person's diet and enough water going in each day, it'll just kind of skid to a halt in there, and then it starts killing off the tissue around it. So an impacted bowel initially presents as colon cancer. Same kind of, or same family of symptoms. And so the conversation at the clinic was, well, we're gonna give him a whole bunch, we're basically gonna power wash his guts from the bottom. We're gonna give him a whole bunch of enemas, and if that doesn't soften up and blast everything out, then we're gonna life flight him to Salt Lake City so they can cut out his large intestine before it starts rotting, because it's halfway there. So, he had a bad day, and it was from eating ramen and not enough water. Now granted, that was in a desert environment where you need to be drinking up to 2 gallons, including electrolytes, each day. But here out east, it's easy to forget to eat and drink enough, and very easy to forget to eat enough of the right stuff. So, before we start going on summer camp, adjust your diet to what you're going to be eating on summer camp so it's not a shock to your system on day one. That's a very unpleasant bus ride with somebody adjusting to whole foods, right? You need to adjust your gut biome to the presence of fiber, otherwise that fiber is going to start fermenting, and fermented fiber in the gut comes out smelling like sulfides or rotten eggs. So, this isn't a wait till the last second and run to Walmart and get the cheapest food that I can kind of a thing. Like with cruising local thrift shops for discount, nice brand name, high quality outdoor fiber clothes. Cruise Schnucks, Cruise Kroger, Walmart, wherever you go to get stuff. What's the German one? Aldi has pretty decent stuff for reasonable prices, for the most part. You gotta have a quarter to stick in the cart so that you don't steal a cart, but other than that, once you get in, it's a halfway decent food store. and it's got that German engineering on prices. Prices are low, selection's great, and it's decent, mostly pretty healthy stuff. So shoot for whole grains instead of processed grains, refined flour, stuff like that. Yeah.
How well does like citrus keep like in a pack over time?
You don't, unless you have it dehydrated.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
You can dehydrate it. That works just fine. We'll have, especially when we'll go out of use, we'll have a bunch of small towns that we'll be passing through, and so we can stop in, gas stations or super Walmarts and stuff like that, and very commonly one person will throw in for like a 30 bag of like cuties, those little orange hybrid thingies, and everybody will eat them for a couple of days, and then the next person will get them at the next spot down the way. We're always going to be fairly close to stores.
Okay.
While we're at Acadia, our stores are tourist trap town stores, so those prices can be very high. But I try to get us to the grocery stores that the townies go to instead of the tourons.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
What low processed foods hold the best and aren't super heavy?
Yeah, so granola. You can get high protein granolas with like whey protein added in. And if you get a granola mix with dried berries like cranberries and or blueberries in it, that adds a whole bunch of stuff like vitamin C and all sorts of things, and you can just grab whatever small or large handful you need at any point. And at this point, if you go to like, you guys ever been in a neighborhood co-op? They used to could have like 5 or 6 different flavors of pretty decent granola. You could just buy it by the scoop or the pound, and in that way you won't get sick of eating the same thing for 20 days straight. That's a problem. A lot of folks will go for like Mountain House or Backpackers Pantry things or MREs. MREs are designed to constipate you though, so you have to take the laxative with them as well. Mountain House, Backpackers Pantry, all those freeze-dried food things are awesome. They're generally pretty big portions. They're also really expensive because you gotta pay for a bunch of liquid nitrogen to pull all that moisture out on the front end. But they're very easy to use. Let's see, what else? There are a lot of like natural style, Cliff Bars and stuff like that that are pretty good, not super processed. You're looking for anything that's like kind of chunky looking instead of like the smooth slime just extruded out on the conveyor belt or whatever. Pemmican. Pemmican's really good if you're not vegetarian. That's a great one. If you are a vegetarian, seitan is a good proteiny alternative. And you can get it seasoned all sorts of different ways: barbecue, buffalo, whatever. If you get stuff like chunky peanut butter and whole wheat tortillas, both of those last a real long time. They're very energy dense. Whole grain, whole wheat tortillas. And anymore, you can get tortillas with like spinach mixed in or lentils mixed in that are higher protein and or higher fiber. Like the bread is half the meal.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good stuff. On the drink side of things, pretty much anything goes. If you put beer into a Camelback, you'll never get the taste or smell of it out, and you're drinking beer water for the rest of the service life of that Camelback, which is typically not very long after that because you just throw it out. And I don't want to be landfilling a bunch of stuff for bad choices around beers. That's such a waste of a good beer. Also, if you are going to use Camelbacks for hydration instead of like exterior bottles or Nalgene's or something like that, you want to never put in any water additives like Kool-Aid or Gatorade, Powerade, something like that. Those powdered mixes can even add some nutrition, like in the case of Tang with vitamin C, but it's a warm, moist, dark environment, and it's really hard to keep those Camelbacks clean out in the field. When you're at home, you got like the whole brush kit and those little oxidizer tablets and stuff. it's just a big hassle on the field. So just put water in a Camelback and you're good to go. What else? You good? All right, is your brain full yet?
Oh, my brain's been full since
All right. So that's kind of all I have for today. But I'm here for all the questions until we're all sick of me. So.
Well, going back to the clothing, you said absolutely no cotton in any blend. Like, even if it's like a low cotton blend, you know, like maybe like nylon, you know,
Do you want
90% or whatever, spandex. 30%,
Nope.
No cotton. At
Nope.
all. Just straight.
That's a hard no,
Yeah.
as they say in Letterkenny, Ontario.
Okay.
And I wish it wasn't that way, because most of my clothes, not that. But this is, you know, for most of us going into field forestry upon graduation, this is just building up your professional library of gear, just like getting saws and chainsaws and hatchets and fire starters and all that stuff. It's the same thing. Just you happen to wear it instead of wield it. So, yeah. What else? Yeah.
Can you bring up that link again?
Which one?
This one.
Oh, the page link?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just logan-park.org.
Okay, thank you.
And then it's under the teaching section at the top of that menu. So logan-park.org, teaching menu, Forest Rec Summer Camp. Click that. And then this page links to stuff like the document version of the gear list and everything else. Okay. Yeah.
And for the vehicles, is it like the passenger vans? They have it, you know, the motor pool here, like that size.
Yeah, so they're 15 passenger vans, but for liability reasons they pull out the back bench
Okay.
because those are super high center of gravity
Yeah.
and they love to roll and kill everybody. So
Yeah.
if I can, I'll get us into a 14-person bus. But we're a little bit too top heavy on the class list for that. So those buses are 14-person. They have a DVD player and a TV. They got that little table so you can play cards or whatever on the drives and stuff. And they have a dedicated cargo compartment in the back as well. So they work pretty well. I think John's planning on driving, so if you guys like John, you can ride with him and get away from me for a while.
I ain't carrying
Yeah.
any of your gear though.
Fair enough.
Carry your own damn gear.
You have one bench of seats in your truck, or?
Oh, I got bench seats. They're perfect.
Okay. Cool.
But the back seat, I'm assuming I'm gonna have to bring a cooler, so that might take up a little space. But I mean, I got one of those big ass Coleman coolers, so we can load more shit in there if we had to.
Cool. Alright.
You sure I don't need to bring any camping gear? Or I mean cooking gear, I should just clarify.
I have a Dutch oven. We have some, like the charcoal starters. My Coleman dual fuel stove sank to a watery grave on a canoe trip out at Ozarks. But I have.
You want me to go down and get it next week?
Yeah, I got a dozen stoves. Utensils, you probably want to have your own. I have stuff, but it's like super cheap steel stuff.
So you
And
get your own mess kit is what you're saying?
yeah,
For those
your
of us
mess
who don't
kit, you don't want your mess kit to be plastic. I don't care if it's lightweight or heavyweight or what, but if you're trying to stir everything every night with a plastic spoon,
It
you're
breaks
eating a
food.
whole lot of DEET and things like it. So,
You can go to Army Navy Surplus Store, has a couple of them, and there's a couple different canteen styles.
yeah.
Cause you always wanna have a back canteen too with water.
If you want to go buy for life, get some titanium stuff. There's some really fun, goofy, nerdy, deep dive stuff on Etsy if you really just have to have like a titanium pry bar for your keychain, whatever. But your mess kit, it should be not plastic, and lightweight or heavy steel is up to you. Okay. Cool. All right. If there are no further questions, you'll think of more stuff. save it for the next meeting. We'll get together again, and pretty soon we'll pivot from information transfer to having everybody bring their packs, tents, and stuff like that, and we'll practice setting things up. We can set up a hose. You can practice setting up your tent under rain conditions, so that you're confident and ready to go on that. Nobody ever takes me up on that, but we could totally do it.
You know, that would be fun if there was like a reward incentive, like, hey, we get to get out of something early, but nah.
The best way to figure out if your tent is going to cause you a disaster is to look at the material of the poles. If they're fiberglass poles, they're trying to cut costs and not do you a favor. If they are aluminum poles or carbon fiber poles, good to go. Or steel if you're base camping, that's fine too. All right. Cool beans. See you later. No Ozark Trails tents. No Ozark Trails tents. All right, cool.